Let's talk about DKIM, which stands for Domain Keys Identified Mail, and what implications it has for deliverability, for authentication in email, and why it is important to actually implement DKIM for the email messages that you send out. So first off, DKIM, along with SPF and DMARC, are the trio of email authentication protocols that enable your mail to be sent properly to the receiving inboxes. The receiving inboxes utilize a combination of these three protocols to ensure that your mail is authenticated, is in alignment to who you are as a sender, as well as to make sure that the contents of the message has not been modified or corrupted during transport. DKIM is the mechanism to ensure that last part, to make sure that it hasn't been a corrupted content of messages that the receiving email provider gets versus the one that you meant to send out. So it's a security layer mechanism at the core of it, but it has implications for deliverability and actually being able to reach the inbox of your subscribers. Because if you fail DKIM authentication, it's very likely that your emails will be rejected and or quarantined and therefore never reach your end subscriber to be able to expose them to your message. In that vein, DKIM, without getting too technical, basically is utilizing a version of public-private key encryption to make sure that it's protecting the contents of the email you're sending, and the receiving servers can then check against a public signing key or your public DKIM signing key by querying against your domain name system records and then come up with their own hash to see if it matches. And if it does, then you pass DKIM checks and therefore pass that additional layer of authentication. It has a better chance for your mail to get into the inbox. Now let's talk about the example of an actual DKIM record and what that looks like, as well as explain a little bit about the different tags within there. A DKIM record is similar to SPF or DMARC record, a text type record that goes in your DNS host system. The first line here is a V equals DKIM1, which indicates basically the type of record, in this case, the protocol DKIM, the first version of DKIM. And then afterwards, you might see something like K equals RSA, which is just indicating the key encryption algorithm, in this case RSA. After that, you'll have a P equals and a long string of numbers and letters. And basically, this is your public signing key. At its core, the structure of the DKIM record isn't particularly complicated. And you might wonder, well, how do I actually generate this? Now, of course, if you're managing your own email servers, there's possibilities to actually use RSA algorithms to generate the key. But most of the time, you're probably using third-party software for sending your emails. In those cases, then all you need to do is you need to go into documentation for each sending platform. Remember, it's important that you do this for every technology platform that you're currently using to send any emails, because you want to make sure DKIM is set up for all of those so that they all pass. Now go into documentation, and oftentimes they will just straight up give you, hey, please implement these DKIM records exactly as it is into your DNS systems. Many times on a single platform, they might ask you to implement more than one DKIM record. There might be 1, 2, maybe 3 or 4 even sometimes. That's not a problem. Unlike SPF records, you can have multiple DKIM records. That's not a problem at all on a single domain. And you just want to go through and implement those and then verify with your platform, and it should tell you whether or not you're verified. Now, one more thing to note is that the host of the DKIM record here there's a specific structure to it. So first it will start with something called a selector, which is a arbitrary name that many of the platforms will just assign to identify itself as the platform. and to not have too much conflict with your other DKIM records. So this could be something like Sign, it could be something like Google, it could be SA, it could be actually anything arbitrary insofar as there's no conflict. Then after the first dot, it will have this underscore domain keys. And that is just an identifier of this type of text record as well as a domain key type of record. And then afterwards, if it's on your root domain, that's it. But if you're implementing this on a subdomain, for example, then you'll have a suffix like dot send or dot whichever, a mail, whatever your subdomain that you're implementing this DKIM record on. That's important to mention so you're used to seeing the general structure and understanding that depending on if you're implementing on a subdomain or root domain, that you may or may not need that suffix. After all this, you will have a well-functioning DKIM record set up as long as you go through each one of your platforms and make sure to go through your documentation, add it into your domain name system records, and verify it. And once that's done, voila, you should be good in terms of your DKIM authentication and therefore have a better chance of getting into inboxes.